Hello and welcome to the latest edition of The Hex with Daniel Robertson, Armand Kafai, John Arnold. Don't forget, give us a thumbs up, hit the like button, give us a comment, let us know what you think about the episode, subscribe for sure. And guys, we will discuss the sixth hottest topics in North American soccer. Let's do it. Big news from the big man, Tom Bogert, today. One of the biggest transfers outgoing in MLS history. Cucho Hernandez, the starting forward of the Columbus Crew, who has scored 49 goals and 31 assists in the playoffs and MLS regular season over the last 2.5 years. He is being sold to Real Betis. The move is official. It's done. Armand, where does this leave the Crew?
Well, it leaves them with a massive gap up top. It leaves a massive gap overall. The thing is, knowing the Crew, you know they have something lined up. At least they should have something lined up. Look what happened when they sold Zilla Rayon. They had Rossi ready to bring in almost immediately after. The thing is now it's going to be a little bit tough for the Crew is that the European window is now closed. It's going to, I think it closes tonight or around that time or something like that. Quick. So with the European window closing, teams are going to be hesitant to get rid of players because they can't get replacements for them unless players really want to leave. So again, with the Crew, it leaves them in a tough spot because Cucho was perennially an MVP, MVP player basically for the 2.5, 3 years that he was at the club. Pushed them to MLS Cup glory, pushed them to Leagues Cup glory. I mean, he's an incredible player that did incredible things. And when
did they have to do the deal? So then why did they do the deal?
I think you have to do the deal for a couple of reasons. I think the value makes sense for them, and I think also you have to respect the ambitions of a player, right? If a player wants to go back to Europe, and then the fee makes sense. I think you have to respect that. And with Betis is no slouch. They're in the top half of La Liga. I think a few points off the.
They're in 10th. They're in 10th right now. Yeah. They're in the Europa Conference League. I don't know if that's desire to play in that prestigious tournament.
Europe
got him across the line. But John, people were saying 16 million. Like some fans are saying, "Oh, not enough." That seems crazy to me.
Yeah, for me, it's a good price, and of course, it's still unclear as we're recording this if that's pre-add-ons or if there
pre-add-on. It is pre-add-on.
Okay, if he hits certain bonuses, if you trust in him. I had the pleasure to speak with Cucho many times when he was with Columbus. I did a big piece for him in 2023 for the MLS site. I talked to him a lot at All-Star in Columbus. I talked to him a lot in Leagues Cup in Columbus, which also indicates how successful he was because they kept being in the finals of these tournaments or these big moments that they were sending even reporters like me to. I think this is a move that he's wanted. And I think that the club wants to do right by Cucho. I mean, even sending Zilla Rayon out, I think was a good deal. This is a guy who, despite the fact that he's been in amazing form and won all these trophies and been so critical for the Columbus Crew, still is very much on the fringe of the Colombian national team, even though they need a striker. I think that a move to Betis will help him do that. And if he can consolidate himself in La Liga, I think it's great. The other thing to note is that he was in Europe and it didn't go so well. And so I think this is something that's going to allow him at age 25 to take another crack now with the lessons that he's learned from his first time in Europe and now what he's done with Columbus. So to me, it's a move that I wasn't super surprised by. We heard him linked with even Monterrey.
And maybe having a contract dispute as well. Like he wasn't in love with his contract.
I'm not sure what exactly is going on behind the scenes, but I do think that he really did give everything to the city. They got a pretty good return for him. And look, there's no way the front office was shocked by this opportunity because, again, he was linked with other clubs months ago. I'm not saying they have who they wanted lined up. Perhaps their targets 1 and 2 already signed somewhere else or were too exposed, whatever. But I do think that it's not something that a competent front office like the Crew doesn't have sort of in their sights. I'm not saying, I don't know that it looks like, look, like you say, they signed Rossi right after Zilla Rayon, and obviously that was a replacement, but it wasn't like for like. This is a little bit of a different situation because it's like, well, you need a forward, but I do think they probably have something that they're comfortable with ready. Who knows exactly what it looks like. I also think it's a lot different than trying to replace Nancy. If Nancy goes to a French team like he's been rumored or we all think he might, that's a bigger gap and a little harder to replace.
You touched on two pieces of what I wrote for my notes on this move. One, that the Columbus Crew are a just exemplary, the picture of an exemplary MLS organization and how serious clubs operate. They signed a player for a lot of money. What was it, like $10 million when they first signed him, somewhere around there. He does everything they asked of him. They win trophies. They made money on him. That is, everyone did this right across every facet. Like that, no one comes out of this looking anything but great. Two, this cements MLS just another notch in the belt of outside of Europe. They are arguably the most attractive league in the world at this point. I don't really see how, if you are a player that doesn't do that well in Europe, you want to try something else, you still have a lot in the tank, but you could still revitalize your career. This is, I mean, what more can you ask for at this point if you are a player like that, where MLS cements itself as, if you are that $8 to $10 million player, maybe you went to the Premier League, you went to La Liga, the Bundesliga, it didn't work out for you. You don't want to just bounce around to maybe a bottom rung team of the same league you're in. You want to go try something new. You can go to MLS, you can revitalize your image, revitalize your national team image, and get another deal that makes you more money and gets you to a great team. Kudos all around. Sticking with transfer news, but inter MLS, the cash for players market. What do we call that, Armand? The cash, is it the CFP? Is it the second type of CFP?
C4P? I don't know.
C4P?
Cash for players? I don't know.
I don't know.
It's just call it transfers, man.
The transfers. It's exploded in recent days, the brand new mechanism. The first two deals are done now. I don't think there's been more than two. I think there's been two. Let's start in Houston. Jack McGlynn, he was sold to the Dynamo from the Philadelphia Union. He had almost 100 games played, a Union homegrown, just turned 21, a deal that could rise to as much as $3.5 million. And then Dejan Joveljic, the hero from MLS Cup, LA Galaxy's run, sold for $4 million to Sporting Kansas City. First off, Armand, you're the cap expert here, the transfer expert. Is this how this mechanism was supposed to function in general?
Absolutely. Yes, it's to keep talent within the league. That's the whole point of it. They want to retain the talent and keep them in the league. In the case of Jack McGlynn, he had European interest, but they elected to stay within MLS with an offer that could help them out a little bit more in that regard. And with Joveljic, it was more of a situation where he was linked with Tigres at one point, but SKC came in with a deal, and they were able to keep that talent within the league instead of giving it to Liga MX or sending him outside of MLS. So the mechanism is working, I think, the way it's supposed to, is targeting the right players. It's actually really funny, Daniel and John. I was at the American Soccer Insights conference where Onstad actually said, Pat Onstad, the GM of the Dynamo, came out and said, we actually just completed a deal for a Philadelphia Union player. And people were like, who is this? Who is this? And ended up being McGlynn. And with McGlynn, it's a player that's young that kind of didn't fit with what the Union were doing. He's a player that's more possession-based. He's
one
great.
Of the stars
He's
of the
great.
January camp.
Absolutely. He's great, but he didn't fit with the Union's kind of style of super direct style of play. He slots into the Dynamo as a progressive 8. He fits in perfectly there. Like absolutely perfect. And on a U22 deal, he's going to sit there at $200K against the cap. That's going to be nothing. He's going to have that for 3-4 years. They choose to keep him there. So the deal is working exactly the way it is because it's keeping talent within the league, and it's also helping teams like Houston, who were low on allocation money, being able to go through other avenues to pick off players such as Jack McGlynn.
With big holes in midfields. John, which one of these two deals, which team do you think got the better deal on this one?
I think it's Houston and McGlynn. I think Joveljic is a good player, but Willie Agata did a lot of the same things for Sporting Kansas City that I think Joveljic will do. I think that the Tigres interest was real. I don't think that he was their first or second choice. They still haven't signed. I wouldn't be surprised if they do. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. I'm not saying it's a bad move, but I thought Armand's newsletter in FAM really explained interestingly like why the Galaxy had to do this. I feel like every week that we get together, we're talking about the Galaxy offloading a pretty good player, and that's what they've done once again. And Armand, people can check out your article to understand in plain English exactly why the Galaxy were sort of forced to make this deal. But despite SKC sort of putting their hand up, I feel like the McGlynn will probably end up with a better year. Also, just a better, to me, projection long term when you talk about, hey, like, what's the future? I think they're both good players with good futures, but I do feel like McGlynn is the kind of guy who maybe he is making that European jump in a year or two, and it could be quite interesting.
Can he replace Carrasquilla pretty like for like? How does that work?
Maybe. Yeah. It was always interesting, the midfield dynamic to me, where when you had Coco and Herrera both playing there, it was always interesting to me. Now they're both playing for different teams in Liga MX, but maybe it's not the exact same. But I think you give them the opportunity at least to try and fill that position. it's going to be an interesting sort of season to watch what the Dynamo do in a lot of respects. I think the midfield is kind of the biggest question for me.
Podcasts are always more interesting when we all agree on things, right? But
Yeah, I guess.
I gotta agree with you guys. And I will say, I don't really understand the Joveljic move as much for Sporting Kansas City, because Dejan Joveljic was great because he was like the third option that teams had to stop. And you had to stop Gabriel Peck and Joseph Paintsel. I never rated Joveljic as like a $4 million type of forward. I thought he was a nice player, but he's a guy who needs like 4 or 5 chances to score. When you put him on Sporting Kansas City, like they don't have those wingers that are creating as many chances anymore. And $4 million, like that's a lot of money to spend. The other thing that just keeps in the back of my head here is, if Dejan Joveljic is a $40 million player, Armand, what does that say about the Jesus Ferreira deal?
40 million.
Excuse me.
I was gonna say, damn, if Dejan Joveljic is a $40 million player, then Cucho's a $200 million player.
All right. But the recent GAM moves, like FC Dallas got half that for Jesus Ferreira, a starting forward for the U.S. national team in the last World Cup, went for half as much. Now, am I getting this wrong in the sense of transfer fee is not the same as GAM?
Yes. So within that, the transfer fee is money. It's like real life money, not the allocation.
But you can convert it into GAM, right?
Well, in Joveljic's case, it's going to be a little bit difficult to convert because again, you can read it on my blog, but technically when he graduated off that U22 deal, he's a designated player. So you have to recoup what you paid for him. It's a little bit weird. With Ferreira, though, I think Ferreira is the player that you would kind of think about for these deals. Like the kind of player that you would get. And also cash flow does matter in the case of it, right? Like we've seen like the rumors of Dallas going after Evander or players like that. That's only because they were able to sell Alan Velasco for a big chunk. That cash flow does matter. I think if Dallas did hold off a little bit, I think they could have probably made use of this deal, or this mechanism, which is also weird because Clark Hunt's a part of the committee that makes it.
Committee that put it together.
Yeah, committee that put it together. So maybe he didn't think that they could do it. Maybe he didn't think it could pass, and it did pass in the end. I'm not sure if they wanted to even wait. Maybe they were kind of like, we just need to get rid of him and panic deal, kind of like what our glorious Mavericks did with Luka Doncic.
Easy.
But like overall, to me, I think if Joveljic is getting $4 million, I think FC Dallas probably could have gotten more out of Jesus Ferreira in the end.
I like that you talking about teams converting cash into GAM is basically the same explanation as me watching Ozark and seeing the money laundering situation. I don't quite understand it, but I'm sure the numbers add up.
John, it's the most wonderful time of year. The CONCACAF Champions Cup, is back. 27 teams from 10 leagues kicking off the regional championship. It'll take a little while to get this thing up and running. It starts on Tuesday night, but the matchups maybe aren't the most. It's kind of like week 0 in college football, where you're super hyped up about it, and then it's Nevada versus San Jose State or something like that. But John, do you think this has a potential to be the biggest Triple C ever? And from a just kind of high level standpoint, what needs to happen to make this the competition that we think it should be?
I've kind of said for the last several years that I think what needs to happen is almost nothing. Like Real Hope against Cruz Azul, probably not going to be a very close game. I did a piece on the Haitian club on my newsletter, which will surprise no one. But it's really interesting. They're trying their best, but like Haiti is really, really difficult place right now, and they're going to play in a neutral site. And even if they were probably at their best, they probably wouldn't be Cruz Azul. But I think like once you kind of get out of this round, you have a potential Clásico Nacional between America and Chivas. You have other potential rivalries. Messi and Miami are in the competition. They couldn't get past Monterrey last year. The Crew could. I mean, that was great last year. And if you kind of get this inertia of good tournament after good tournament after good tournament, I think that you're going to have a strong one. The one change I would make is go home and home on the final. Last year it wasn't quite fair, and the Crew were kind of saying, "Oh, we got sick," which I didn't really totally buy as an excuse. But hey, they said it happened. I think that would be a change to go back. But ultimately, I think that while this week might not bring huge surprises, this competition is good and will keep being good. And I actually think Leagues Cup helps it. People sort of think that maybe it takes it away, but you get a little bit of that rivalry going. A team like Club America that hasn't been able to win CONCACAF in a couple years, hasn't been able to win Leagues Cup ever. the pressure starts to get there, even though they've won 3 domestic competitions. To me, like, they have to win it this year, which is a high standard, but that's the standard they set.
Yeah, and I do want to ask you, outside of MLS and Liga MX, which we'll talk about in a minute, are there any teams from Central America? And we do see this even in like UEFA Champions League, et cetera, where you have those smaller countries that play in the early knockout rounds and they kind of get a chance to show themselves. Is there anyone that you think can contend and pick off a Liga MX team or an MLS team from the Central American and Caribbean countries?
Not particularly. I mean, you always look at Costa Rica. Alajuelense should, because they're making a lot of noise about how they deserve to be in the Club World Cup. They have a point in some respects. We've talked a million times on this show about the Pachuca León double ownership that is explicitly banned by FIFA's rules that it seems like they're going to look over. But I don't know that they have the squad to do it. They're trying to bulk up. They've signed a couple players, but like one of the players they just signed is like Daniel Chacon, who was unable to crack the Colorado Rapids roster. And he's not like a big ticket, like, oh, we've got Chacon, we're going to go win the thing. But, these are the type of players they're able to reinforce with. It's just not strong enough.
Kendall Waston's return to Vancouver doesn't light you up?
I mean, it can light me up all at once, but that doesn't mean you're going to make a run in the tournament.
My favorite part of the show, guys, is predictions. I love the predictions. John doesn't like them. John doesn't like to go on record about things because he knows we'll just pick him apart later as the expert in CONCACAF versus little old me and Armand. But let's look at the bracket now. Let's take a deeper dive into it. And as a reminder, the 5 teams who are kind of champions, either champions of their countries or champions of their regional tournaments, they get a bye through this round. That's Columbus, Cavalier from Jamaica, Alajuelense, Club America, and LA Galaxy. And then 22 teams are playing 11 ties. And then you get into the 16-team bracket with 2-leg knockout until the final. Armand, before we give our predictions for our finalists and champion, what sticks out to you about this bracket in general?
Well, there's a lot that kind of sticks out. I mean, you have a potential for an LAFC Columbus second round game, which is always like super fantastic, or series, excuse me.
They always bring great matchups, yeah.
You always have a super classico in round 2 as well too. We just talked about. There's a lot. I mean, I think that the most interesting one, I think for me, is the potential. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but the potential of like a Cruz Azul Seattle second round game, because Cruz Azul has been kind of not great recently, and like Seattle, from what we've seen, has a team that's pretty deep, and it seems like a team that's ready to go further into competitions. But often we see teams that aren't really doing great in Liga MX knocking out teams that we expect to do good in MLS. I wonder if that dynamic is going to be there between them. And also, I think the final thing I want to say. That second round game between was it Cavalier and Miami? Like that's electric.
They're excited for Messi and Kingston, man. I've been getting messages from people in Jamaica that I haven't heard from in a minute, and they're like, "Yeah, are you coming down for Messi?"
How heartbreaking would it be if they lost to SKC?
Have you really gotten messages from people in Kingston? Really?
Not like looking for tickets or anything, but like asking if I'm coming down and telling me like, "Hey, man, we're planning to do this for the game. Like, we'd love to have coverage." I mean,
they would be heartbroken.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, but that's what the competition is about. For me, as I'm looking at it too, I'm trying to think of who are the MLS teams that can pick off the Liga MX teams. And I would say if I'm MLS, I'm going to be a little bit worried because I think that there aren't going to be that many matchups early. But right now, could Seattle beat Cruz Azul, John?
I think so. I mean, they don't have Anselmi. They looked pretty good against Xolos, but then they had like a 3-0 lead by halftime and then gave it back. They have a really good squad. We'll see like if they decide to appoint a manager, if they roll with Vicente Sanchez. Yes, that one. But yeah, absolutely they could. And I think a lot of the matchups, are kind of friendly. You look at the bracket, we talked about it when it came out. Like there's one of Inter Miami, Columbus Crew, Colorado Rapids is going to be in the quarterfinals, probably against another MLS team, unless Cavalier pulls off like a huge shock. You almost certain now you can say, oh, well, you kind of took each other out, but also you're kind of gathering strength, right? If it's LAFC, Inter Miami in a quarterfinal, whoever is in that semi, you're like, man, these guys are in great form. They've played tough teams. They're feeling themselves. They understand their tactical, idea at this point. So I think in a lot of ways it could break for at least some good late tournament MLS versus Liga MX matchups, which is what we all want to see.
So not semifinals. Give me first. I'll start off with Armand. Give me your two finalists first. Who do you see making the one-off championship game? Which, John, they haven't said exactly where that's going to be yet, right? Like they would love to have
They
it.
can put it wherever. They can put it wherever.
They're going to wait and see who plays in it first. Armand, who are your finalists?
Oof, that's tough. I have America on one side.
Okay.
I mean, that's a pretty chalk thing to say.
I don't think not given their CONCACAF Champions Cup form though. They haven't won it since what, 2015, I think? Something like that.
Yeah. And on the other side, man, it's tough because like I had my picks, but like now I'm like looking like is it like I'm gonna go, man. I think I'm over. I think this is a way over high pick. LAFC America.
Okay, LAFC America. John, where are you going?
That's what I was picking as well.
Damn.
Wow. LAFC America. Okay, I didn't have either of those teams. In the bottom bracket, I went for Tigres. I went a little bit off the board here. I think that they have a pretty easy road. FC Cincinnati could pick them off, but if Lucho Acosta's gone, I don't really like FC Cincy's early season chances here. And then the Galaxy, they've just sold great players. So really, all Tigres has to get through is a semifinal against America or Chivas probably, which, of course, that's going to be tricky. But I think...
Or the Sounders. You just said the Sounders were amazing, and now you're picking them off.
I said they could beat Cruz Azul.
Sounders hate.
The Sounders are not going to beat Club America. No, they do not have a chance of beating Club America. So I'm going Tigres to make the final. They're a team that's won so many times, and Veljko Paunović's coach knows MLS. He can beat MLS teams. And then on the top bracket, Inter Miami. I think this is the one where Inter Miami gets through. Again, they have a pretty easy schedule to get to the semifinal, well, the quarterfinals, I guess. But you're looking at a rematch against Monterrey, most likely in the semifinals. Okay, before that, they just have to go through, maybe LAFC. I fancy Inter Miami's chances. They have the team now. They've already put all their building blocks in place, whereas the other teams still have question marks. So I'm going to go Tigres versus Miami.
Oh, yeah, nothing like a team with no question marks, with a proven coach, with everyone understand. Yeah.
With young players, nothing aging.
They didn't go to penalties in preseason against one of these specific teams that's also playing. I mean,
they got
it's a good pick. It's a good pick. I think those are the two teams that you think are going to come out of the top. Rayados clearly in there as well, especially we'll get to some other things that are happening down there. I hear you, but I think that side of the bracket you're looking at, it's like if an MLS team doesn't come out, it's kind of Sounders or bust on the other half because of what the Galaxy have had to do and the injury to Ricky Puig.
Yeah, man, Cincinnati getting rid of Acosta most likely. And I'm going Tigres to win it. Armand, who lifts the trophy?
America.
Oof, John?
America.
Did you guys
see?
I know you didn't see it, but at the Royal Rumble on Saturday
night. Hey, hold on, no spoilers, bro. Oh, I did see the
someone had a tri-campeon.
Yeah,
someone had tri-campeon America. So shout out to our WWE
wrestling fans.
And finally, staying in Liga MX, one player who could be a huge star in the Triple C. John, you alluded to it a little bit. Sergio Ramos, the three-time Champions League winner. He is very close to joining Monterrey, spurning Jose Mourinho and Fenerbahce. John, this seems crazy. From Sevilla to Real Madrid to PSG to Sevilla to Rayados. What is going on here?
What's going on is he's old, man, and he's not that great at soccer anymore. I do think he'll be fine in Liga MX. Come on, watch his season with Sevilla. Watch the season before that with PSG. I think he clearly has accomplished so much in the sport. The pictures he posts online, it looks like he's staying in great shape. I don't think it's going to be a bust. But if you're Rayados, you already have Hector Moreno as your old veteran center back still hanging on. And now you've added another guy. Now, Toro Guzman, I think, is a good prospect for the future. Kind of the present, he's a good center back, and they do need some defensive help. So it doesn't make zero sense, but to me, it's a move that's made with a lot of view toward marketing ahead of the Club World Cup, CONCACAF Champions Cup. Yes, if you have Sergio Ramos against Messi in the semifinal, not that Messi can't sell out that stadium already, but I do think it just gives your team a little bit of sizzle from an organization that has the budget where they can afford to put a little sizzle in the team. So, I don't think it's a long-term move. He said it's signed for 1 year. It's kind of a low-risk move. I don't know what the financials are, but, that's what happened is you had an older player available. He was linked with MLS clubs in the past, or at least wanted to be linked with MLS clubs in the past. And I just think you're looking at a guy who, look, he's nearly 40. His career is almost over. good for him, I guess, for staying fit, for wanting to have these adventures. It will be an adventure. I think it will be fun to watch. But I don't. It's not the kind of signing that we're talking about at the start of the show, where it's like, ooh, Cucho changes things for Real Betis and even the Conference League. We'll see if a UEFA Champions League winner can do it in CCC.
Is this something where Rayados is reaching out to him, or is he putting himself out there to the league?
I don't know about this specific situation, but I would say this: some of the other players who are free agents who have ended up in various clubs, I think, are often offering themselves to various clubs. I mean, not themselves. Their agent is reaching out to clubs saying, hey, he's open to coming to MLS. He's open to coming to Liga MX. We'd love to get him there. I do think that the both Nuevo León teams are big time destinations now. It's a good lifestyle for players. It's a really nice neighborhood that everyone lives in, relatively safe compared to other parts of Mexico. Big time business community there that can help with sponsorships and that kind of thing that can help big time players get over there. Gignac has obviously paved the way and been the success story for more than a decade now. We've seen other European players come over and have good times in Monterrey, at Tigres, not so much Mexico City. But no, I mean, I think like it's a move that a lot of guys are comfortable making, and you understand why Ramos makes it. But look, the reality is, if LAFC or the Galaxy had wanted them, probably could have had them, right? So I do think that I'm not trying to. It's like I sound like I'm out on the move or like diminishing the move.
It's fun. It's fun.
Yeah, exactly. I'm looking forward to watching it. I don't think he's gonna be bad. But at the same time, like this isn't gonna. I don't see it as like a game changer for Rayados. No.
Right. Armand, are we seeing Liga MX becoming a bit of a retirement league now?
I literally was about to. I literally was gonna say the same thing. It feels like a move MLS, like an MLS move that would be made in like 2014, 15. Like when you got Frank Lampard, and by the way, look at the NYCFC former midfield. You have like Areola, who's the coach of Bournemouth right now. You have Pirlo, you have Lampard in there. It's like pretty funny to look at, but it sounds like
Angelino
a move.
On the wings now at Roma.
And Angelino the GOAT. My favorite player, and his number is fantastic. It was a really nice number.
It's a nice number.
But in the end, like, look, like if you look at like a guy like Sergio Ramos, he's gonna put butts in seats. He's old. He's aging quite a bit. He's 37, 38 years old. And for me, I just see a bunch of his Liga MX moves. I'm kind of just like, okay, you get guys like, for example, like a Mateus Bogusz, right? Like for Cruz Azul, but some of the like the Grandes, some like the bigger teams, it's like kind of like these moves. You're like, okay, Sergio Ramos, and back to your point about questions, or who's offering who, Daniel, is for sure an agent. An agent's for sure just dropping a name, and he's begging someone to take him. Please, like, take him somewhere around here, and I think it'll be fine. But I mean, you know how I feel about aging players, and for example, the James deal. I mean, and James has been fun.
He's been doing great.
I'm
they
not
haven't lost yet.
I'm not exactly crazy about like a 37-year-old center back. I'm not exactly sold on that, but we've seen it work in other leagues. So I mean, it'll be interesting to see how Ramos fits in. I mean, it causes buzz. I get texts from people saying, "Hey, what the hell? People like Mexico is signing Sergio Ramos or James." Like the buzz is definitely more there, but it just feels like an MLS 2014 move versus a move made to be actually to win.
No, I love it though, because this is a team that can do that. This isn't a team where you're building it around his biggest star. It's saying, hey, let's have some fun here. Like we got some cash to spend. Let's just spend some fun money here and
some gam.
Roll the dice. Yeah, roll the dice, see what happens. If it doesn't work, no problem. We'll just ship him out in the summer. But seeing him in Leagues Cup, seeing him in CONCACAF Champions League, and John, like you mentioned, it is going to be fun potentially to have a competitive match of Sergio Ramos between Lionel Messi. What's not to like? If John loves CONCACAF Champions Cup, I love talking about betting odds. And the betting odds for MLS Cup are out. I hit the MLS Cup winner last year. I had a 12.5 to 1 LA Galaxy winner last year. So
how many other bets did you have though?
Only two. I had the Galaxy and I had the Sounders because I thought that the West would be easier to get out of than the East, which I do think is the case again this year. But let's have a little bit of fun here in segment number 6, talking about betting odds. We've got Inter Miami plus 350, 3.5 to 1 is the favorites. LAFC is next at 5.5 to 1. The Galaxy have the third best odds. 6 teams are 20 to, and only 6 teams are better than 20 to 1 odds. So kind of interesting here. I think we should each pick a team that stands out in a good way and a team that you wouldn't touch? And I'm going to kick us off because I know me and Armand have the same answer here.
I bet I feel like I do too.
Yes,
we all do.
I am going to start us off here. Guys, what are we doing? 40-1, Atlanta United.
Yeah,
Atlanta
what's happening
United.
There? What's happening there?
I
thought the books were good at this now. You were saying that the discrepancies aren't as good now.
Well, from week to week, they're not as good. There's not as many in game to game. But what are we doing, guys? 40-1 on Atlanta United, who, by the way, in the last couple hours, the transfer for Latte, the big coffee, was announced as official by Tom Bogert as well. So we've got Atlanta United at 40-1, guys. What are we talking about here? They have worse odds than the Union.
Yeah, which is nuts because
man.
the Union are right now borderline wooden spoon. Like they're not going to be that. They're not going to be that.
They're not going to
good.
make the playoffs.
They're not like. And Daniel, like I'm looking at these odds that you sent us. By the way, Daniel puts this in there because he could hijack our show and make it the bet MLS.
Hey, wait a minute! You guys have both mentioned your Substacks like 50 freaking
I didn't mention my Substack.
I didn't mention
newsletter. Excuse me. Same.
John mentioned the Substack.
You mentioned yours as well. Potato. So let's keep going here.
So let's go back to this. Well, I want to copy you and take Atlanta. I feel like I want something a little different. I mean, even Seattle at plus 2,000. Like
20-1.
What are we doing here? Like they're a team with better, like worse odds than the Red Bulls, which
right now they're the favorite in the West.
Exactly. Like they should be the favorite in the West. And the Galaxy, I'm not necessarily sold on. They don't have a striker right now. They don't. Maybe it works to get one, but they don't have one. Who knows what they could put there? For me, Seattle, they've built a really deep team with the acquisition of Jesus Ferreira, Paul Arriola. You can go kind of throughout with some of the depth that they've added also as well. I think Seattle is like a great pick to even get out of the West, and you can probably get numbers to kind of hedge out of it or do whatever you recommend to do with that. But for me, Seattle.
John, any picks stand out to you besides Seattle or Atlanta?
I mean, I think at some point you're throwing darts, right? Like Austin seems too low to me at 50-1. But I don't actually think they're going to lift MLS Cup. The Fire, if they had signed Neymar, but they didn't. I also don't think he would have been good. So, I mean, I think Atlanta's the real standout, right? They've made a ton of moves that clearly haven't been reflected yet. And I think there's, if you're a betting man, maybe there's an opportunity there for you.
San Jose as well. I want to say San Jose
here.
as well.
Stop it.
It's too low.
6,600 with Bruce? They'll make the playoffs at least potential. Like, they'll be closer than that's such a low number. Like, they'll be better than San Diego.
They have twice as bad odds as the Vancouver Whitecaps. Like, okay, how do the Vancouver Whitecaps have better odds than Atlanta United? That is just...
They just transferred their DP to the Sheffield Wednesday or whatever.
The Dynamo are twice as likely to win as Atlanta United, according to... I don't know, man.
So which of these is the worst number? Now, I will say that the news of today definitely hurts the crew, obviously. So of the five favorites, Inter Miami 3.5-1, LA Galaxy 5.5-1. Sorry, LAFC 5.5-1, Galaxy 8-1, Columbus 9-1, Cincinnati 10-1. Armand, which is the worst of those bets?
I'm not touching the Galaxy. I'm not touching the Galaxy with a 10-foot pole. It's you don't have Ricky Pooch for basically the almost entirety of the season. You just sold off Joveljic. You're gonna have to figure out how to. You still have half the team to make room to make all these guys work. I would not touch the Galaxy. I can't. I don't even know why they're plus 800. I'd have them lower, to be honest with you.
Well, I think it's just the books looking at it and saying, okay, who was the champion last year? Let's just mark them in. John, final question of the day. Inter Miami 3.5-1. Like, you can't really touch any MLS Cup team at 3.5-1, right?
No.
Easy enough. Well, it's going to be a fun week. The first competitive games of CONCACAF starting on Tuesday night, guys. We're going to have plenty to talk about for the next few weeks, and we are just 2.5 weeks away from the MLS season starting. Thank you for listening to The Hex, and we will catch you next week.
I did mention my newsletter. I forgot. I'm sorry.